DUI defense cases.
Good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And tonight we turn our attention to the state legislature, still working on a budget and now also dealing with a squabble among the members about sexism. And with us tonight is House Speaker J.D. Mesnard and Minority Leader Rebecca Rios. Thank you both for joining here. And just a little bit of background on that story. It seems like this goes back about a month or so when Representative Isela Blanc was, they were in a committee, public hearing, and Representative Bob Thorpe apparently thought she was asking too many questions and asked her to leave. She thought she was being bullied at the moment. Now, Mr. Thorpe has since apologized, but, Ms. Rios, you said that you have felt some sexism while being a lawmaker down at the legislature in the past.
Well, I've been at the legislature now for over 20 years, and so my comment had to do with 20 years ago when I got there, and it was almost, I expected I was much younger. I think we've progressed since then. I think some of the issues that have come up in the House have to do more with learning to have mutual respect for one another. A lot of it is what happens when you have a minority-majority party conflict. And so there's a lot of room for growth, and I commend the Speaker on how he has identified that this is an area where we can work together with both caucuses to basically be more mutually respectful.
What about this accusation here? Do you think there's merit to it?
I think that the accusation had to deal more, honestly, with Mr. Thorpe overreaching in his authority. He should not have threatened to use security to throw her out of that committee. And I think that was at the crux of the concern, is that he didn't have the authority to do that. And, we are all very thankful that he did make a public apology on the floor to Isela.
Yeah, and he did apologize. And did you have a discussion with Mr. Thorpe about this, being the leader of the House and all?
Yeah, absolutely. No, what he did was inappropriate. He acknowledged that. He felt badly about it, and at the end of the day, he publicly said that he was sorry, and we're going to make sure that that type of thing doesn't happen again. At the end of the day, as the minority leader said, we want to have a good working relationship, whether it's among Republicans, Democrats, across the aisle. And so that's something, regardless of what accusations have been leveled, there's always room for improvement. I'm going to be seeking to establish an atmosphere of civility to the best of my ability.
All right, let's move on now to another big issue, is budget talks. In the past, Democrats really haven't been involved at all in budget negotiations. I mean, they don't get a lot of their bills heard in the first place, let alone get involved in budget negotiations. Is that changing much this year?
Well, we had a meeting with the leadership, the Democratic leadership, to hear out what they're seeing as their caucus's priorities. We're trying to work through, in the House at least, the Appropriations Committee process, which is going back to how things used to be done, and there's some adjustment there. But we've tried to keep an open line of communication to hear out what their priorities are, and of course what the Republican priorities are. We're going to continue going down that road.
Now, are you satisfied the Democrats are getting their voice heard this year?
The process has vastly improved this session with bringing back subcommittees. We actually had testimony. We had our members that felt like they were a part of the process. In addition to that, we were asked to provide a minority report of what Democratic priorities were, and we have had meetings with the appropriate chairs as well as leadership. So is it everything we want? No, but it is a vast improvement, and I think we are thankful for it, the opportunity to be heard and to put forward our priorities.
Yeah, and give us a sense of where you think budget talks are right now.
So I would say beginning next week, those talks will move beyond what has been a primary focus at the Appropriations Committee level. So for Republicans, we're going to start meeting on Monday afternoon with the broader caucus to hear out what their priorities are, going into it with a framework that the Appropriations Committee Republican members have put together, and then the dialogue will begin. I believe, have a good sense of where the House Republicans are at, and begin then advocating for that position. We'll keep, the lines of communication open with minority as we go and see what we can come up with.
Obviously, a big issue this year with the budget talks is education. Now, we're starting to hear some talk about potentially some lawmakers wanting to go above and beyond what the governor has proposed as a 2% raise, I believe, in the first year for a teacher pay raise. What are you hearing? Is that accurate?
So the governor had proposed a 2% pay raise. It was phased in over 5 years, which meant a 0.4% increase in the first year. I would say that there is a lot of interest in maybe the possibility of beefing that up beyond 0.4% in the first year. I've heard 1% is a nice round number, at least in year one, and I know the Democrats have expressed even beyond that. So I think there is a lot of interest in focusing on teacher salaries. Teachers are a priority. As people say, they're overworked and underpaid. I think a lot of people feel that way, and so this would be at least trying to move the ball down the field.
So over the next couple of years, though, are we talking about, what, a 5% increase, 6%, 8% when it's done, or are we talking about just upping the first year?
I think it's too early to say. We haven't really gone past this year. Right now, we're budgeting for this year, and then as we progress in the budget discussions, we'll talk about future years and what sort of pay increase is phased in over a period of time, but it's a little bit early
A
to
1%
say.
pay raise in the first year, is that good enough for Democrats?
No, and you know, our perspective has been, we identified about $146 million that we could use, that we're recommending be used this year to give all teachers a 4% raise. Now, it would just be for this year. We'd obviously have to look at long-term reform so that we could continue to give that raise. But I think from the Democrat perspective, we recognize there's a teacher shortage, and I think we started the school year with 2,000 empty seats. So the only way I think we're going to truly recruit and retain good teachers is to pay them a better salary.
So where's this money coming from that you've identified that could be used for these raises?
It's a combination of one-time money that's available, ongoing monies that's available, and then another $50 million that we would pull from the lottery fund. Again, because we believe that that is the #1 priority. The governor laid out a number of education priorities, many of which we agree with, but you can only do so much with the amount of money. So we figured do one thing and do it well, and that should be teacher raises.
Is this something that you are seriously considering that could be a viable option here, is listening to this Democratic proposal?
Well, we have looked at the Democratic proposal. I think you have a continuum of proposals from both sides of the aisle, a lot of which focus not only on education generally, but teacher raises specifically. I do want to emphasize that even in increasing in the baseline education funding as we would, that would, in theory, at least some also go to teacher salaries. So when people talk about percentages, whether it's 4 or 1, or they're also talking about, in theory, an increase that should go to teachers if the districts are allocating, as we believe they should, in prioritizing teachers.
All right, let's move on now to university spending and whatnot, because there is a proposal that the governor is pushing right now that would allow the universities basically to keep their sales tax. It's called tax increment financing, and then they would be able to bond against this to build some research facilities. Where is that right now?
Well, that's obviously a proposal the executive put out there as a priority, and there's a lot in there, and I think overall there's support for additional resources to the universities, whether it's for research facilities or other items. What it looks like, the exact package, that's what we're negotiating, and we still have a ways to go.
This would make maybe the university one of the biggest developers in the state. What do Democrats think about this? You
know, Democrats, I think, are a little resentful that we're being pitted between universities and the cities and towns, because part of that proposal takes about $7 million of state-shared revenues from cities and towns. And so I think as a caucus, we would not be very supportive of the proposal as it is. I think there's room for negotiation, and if cities and towns were protected with their revenue pulled out, we'd probably be very supportive.
Okay, now let's move on now to the other issue that doesn't seem to go away, and that's the funding for the Coyotes Arena. They've been down there, it seems like, all session long trying to get a deal to get that done. Is this thing dead, or is so what's going to happen?
There are a couple of big champions, or at least one big champion, and he's in the Senate, we all care about the Coyotes, and I don't want to send a message that we don't. It's just always tough when you're putting taxpayers on the hook for something of this magnitude, and then you'd have other sports teams that we also care about that might be interested. So I think it's got an uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, is this really signaling in kind of a change in attitude when it comes to sports facilities and arenas, that lawmakers, the public, just they don't want to pony up the money for these anymore?
Well, I believe so, and I think given all of the other priorities and needs that the state of Arizona has, this is at the bottom of the list, at least for me personally.
All right, and do you think this is kind of a change?
That's probably a fair assessment.
All right, now let's move on to another. There's a controversial abortion bill that has been moving through, and this would allow force doctors to perform life-saving procedures on fetuses if they feel that they're still alive out there. Now, most doctors say no fetus is going to survive if they're under 22 weeks. I mean, but this bill still keeps moving forward. Shouldn't lawmakers be listening to doctors who know these issues?
Well, I think lawmakers are listening to doctors, are listening to a lot of different people. At the end of the day, this is about what folks think is right when a baby is born alive, the heart is beating, it is a role of government to try the very best, even if it's a long shot, even if it's an uphill battle, to try to save the baby's life. You know, again, in promoting a culture of life, I think you're going to still see Republicans continue to push for that.
Okay, and just a quick response from you.
You know, I think, once again, we see legislators trying to play doctor, and the physicians have already said these are not viable, unfortunately. And so you are going to take away those final moments where a mother might be able to hold that baby, whisk him away, and attempt all these procedures on a baby, what they're saying is not viable. And I think that is really very sad.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for stopping by. But unfortunately, we're going to have to take a quick break. But we do have lots more to come here on Politics Unplugged. Coming up next, the U.S. House unable to muster the votes to repeal and replace Obamacare. And while that leaves the current law in place for now, it also raises a lot of questions. We'll take a closer look at how Arizona hospitals are planning for what comes next.
Surprise! Surprise! I can't believe you! Oh my God, thank you! Thank you so much.
I've never gotten anything given to me in my life.
The Arizona's Family Surprise Squad is powered by Valley Toyota dealers and only on 3TV.
This is all that was left from my accident. And that wasn't even the worst part. Whew, the pain in my neck and back was gnarly.
Nobody plans to be in an accident, but unfortunately they happen. If you're suffering a pain, call Emergency Chiropractic. They will treat you with no deductibles, no copays, and no out-of-pocket costs.
And now, I feel great.
Emergency Chiropractic, the kind of care you want today.
Buckle up.
It's here. Now at Express Flooring, the savings, the markdowns. It's downright madness.
For a limited time, don't just save 50% on your new flooring. Call Express Flooring where you could save up to 70% now during the March Markdown Savings Event. And buy with no interest until 2019.
Free in-home shopping up to 70% off, no interest till 2019. Now that's a slam dunk.
Call Express Flooring today before the madness ends.
Express Flooring is the best. Call 800-EXPRESS.
Honey Nut Cheerios get their delicious taste from honest ingredients, like real delicious honey and real oats. Okay, that's still honey. There we go. We're back to honey again. Who's directing this? That guy. Figures.
Try new Very Berry Cheerios. The taste of real fruit in every bite. So very good.
You can drive a truck, or you can team up with one. The 2017 Nissan Titan. Go the extra mile in a truck that has better acceleration, handling, and braking than Ford F-150. Take on any job. The newly redesigned family of Titans, featuring America's best truck warranty. 5 years, 100,000 miles, bumper to bumper. Get to your local Nissan store today for a low $259 per month lease on the capable 2017 Nissan Titan.
Welcome back to Politics Unplugged, and turning our attention to health care, the U.S. House unable to muster up enough votes to pass a bill that would have replaced and repealed Obamacare. It would have been the second major overhaul of the American health care system in just 7 years, and joining us now to talk about how those changes affect providers is Greg Vigdor, president of the Arizona Hospital and Healthcare Association. Thank you much for being here. Now let's start about this bill. Your organization came out against this. Why did you do that? How would this have affected patients, and how would this have affected hospitals in Arizona?
Yes, our opposition was not a political statement, but a healthcare statement. The proposal was bad for patients, bad for hospitals and the healthcare system, bad for our economy. For patients, hundreds of thousands of Arizonans would lose their health coverage. They would still get sick, and they would present at hospital emergency rooms to get their care. That's not the best place to go for care, because it's going to be costlier, because you're going to be much sicker, and there's probably not a lot we can do for you at that point in time. That's also going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in uncompensated care. We saw this during the Great Recession when we went through some problems like this. And what has to happen with that money either gets passed on to the business community. If that can't happen, then hospitals either have to do service cuts or even contemplate closure. In particular, rural hospitals, there's a great threat that they just cannot navigate the changes.
Like I was going to say, I talked to former Governor Jan Brewer, and she told me that it would just devastate rural hospitals. Hospitals would have closed down, and all those jobs that those hospitals would have provided would have went away as well.
Yes. Arizona's healthcare system has been a huge part of our economic recovery. We were estimating at least 20,000 jobs that go away, billions of dollars of lost economic output. It was going to be devastating, and that's why we opposed it. We've continued to pledge we're willing to work on solutions. This was not it.
Okay, now we've heard a lot of talk, too, about Obamacare being in a death spiral. Do you think that's the case from your perspective here in Arizona?
We know there are problems with the Affordable Care Act. We've said from the start there are things that need to be fixed. Looking at Arizona, the big problem was actually with the exchanges, the individual and family market. And certainly in Arizona this past year, we saw a real problem with price spikes and lack of options. That has to be fixed. There's ways to do that.
Well, how do you get more people on those exchanges, though? That seems to be the big problem right now.
Well, it's part about the market design incentives. It's a complicated thing to figure out how to structure that, but a lot of what was in this bill was actually just funding reduction. So it was actually taking away the money that helped people buy the coverage. It might have been expensive, but they actually had a lot of support. And while tax credits are just a fine vehicle to use if you do it the right way, they weren't high enough really to incent people to do it. But again, our problems with this bill were much more about the Medicaid provisions than the exchange provisions.
Yeah, because under this bill, Governor Jan Brewer mentioned just a few moments ago, used Obamacare to expand the Medicaid population in Arizona, and those people would have lost health care if this bill had passed, correct?
Exactly, and we called it Medicaid restoration because we're restoring coverage that was provided by the vote of the people twice to Arizonans. Childless adults is what we call them. But it's really important to get those folks in the system. They have behavioral health problems. They have substance abuse problems. Somehow those problems are going to pop up if we don't take care of them through Medicaid.
So if Obamacare is not in the death spiral, as we've been hearing, what is working with Obamacare in this state?
Well, I think mostly the coverage provisions in Medicaid. There's a lot we have to improve in Medicaid, but it's actually working here in Arizona. Maybe other states it's not working as well, but here we have a pretty good model. We have a way to get into these populations and try to figure out how to improve their health, try to lower their demand for health care. That's a way to bring down health care costs. Again, there's so much we have to do to achieve what we call the triple aim of better care, better health, and lower costs, but parts of the Affordable Care Act are helping us do that.
So are we seeing, better outcomes when it comes to people who are on the Medicaid rolls? Are they healthier? Is mental health being treated more efficiently?
Yes, we're seeing better outcomes. Again, we have a long way to go to really tackle these problems, but it's a far better solution than having people without health coverage and just showing up at the emergency room when they're way too far gone to really do much that's going to make a difference.
So how do you get more choice here? How do you get those people on the exchanges?
I think we're going to have to work with the health plans.
Good.
Probably a matter of private negotiations of trying to encourage them to be part of the solution. I don't think we really did that enough last year, and maybe we're going to have to try that again. I think we're going to have to continue to work at the federal level to see if there's a better policy blueprint to allow this to play out. Clearly, this was not it, though.
Now, it seems that Arizona has become kind of ground zero as this example of where Obamacare has failed. Do you agree with that assessment? Has Obamacare failed here?
I can't say that. I said the exchanges are a problem, and especially the last year. But if you look at the first year of the rollout, our premiums were actually among the lowest in the nation. So again, it's a year-to-year proposition in any state. The individual and family market in the nation has been historically unstable. So spikes and dips come along every year. We've got to figure out a way to stabilize it.
So is there a lot of uncertainty now with people in your industry, right? Because, this bill is dead for now. Is there any fear that it might come away and then people like just kind of in a state of flux right now?
We're just considering it alive and still under development. The healthcare politics does not go away, so we're just trying to figure out if our next adventure is the same story or whether it's a new story. And we're going to have to keep working on these problems. We have a lot of work to do in healthcare across the nation and in Arizona. I think we have to commit to it, not just on the government side, but what we can do as private businesses, individuals. Everybody's got to come together to find a solution.
Gotcha. And if you could we change any one thing right now about Obamacare to help Arizona, what would it be?
I would do more with the prevention aspects to try to figure out how we can lower the demand for health care. How do we get people more responsible for their own care? Working out, eating better, preventive care. Those are the things that offer great opportunity to lower demand for health care and lower the cost for everybody.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you for stopping by. We have lots more to talk about here on Politics Unplugged. Just ahead, why one Arizona senator says your internet provider should not have to ask permission before sharing your browser history with other user information. How your privacy could be the victim of a bill aimed at the FCC right here on Politics Unplugged.
Hey, you like to party? We like to party.
Birthday parties, baseball parties.
Bachelorette parties.
Bottom line, we like to party. And you know who we always invite to our parties? The furniture.
Couldn't have one without them. We used to play it safe or freak out or just burn the furniture and claim the insurance money. But then we got Bliss cushions from discountpatio.com and we party harder than ever.
Waterproof, dustproof, antimicrobial, cootie proof.
Bottom line, this furniture is ready to party.
With a capital P.
Hey!
At Midway Chevrolet, our Cash for Junkers gives you at least $3,500 when you trade in your 99 or newer vehicle. Use it to get an absolutely unbeatable Midway Chevy deal. Get 20% off MSRP on every 17 Spark and Sonic in stock. 44 Sparks, all 20% off. 20 Sonics, all 20% off. Add your Cash for Junkers cash, and that's 44% off Spark, 41% off Sonic. Dump your junker. Get at least $3,500 for your trade and get an absolutely unbeatable deal. Now at Midway Chevrolet.
Hello?
I just didn't recognize you. Sweet new ride.
Thanks.
But you get a promotion? Wait, are you our boss now?
You're the boss. I'm gonna need more vacation days.
Oh, can I call in sick today?
Guys, I don't have that kind of power, but I can park this car with my mind.
Now you're just showing off.
Lease the first ever all-wheel drive Infiniti QX30 crossover at your local Infiniti retailer.
Universal Technical Institute is now training students for future positions in the transportation industry. If you have a passion for putting machines to the test, UTI is ready for you with over $15 million in sponsored scholarships this year. We build our programs with the biggest names in the business so you can learn the professional skills you need in classrooms like these. Visit uti.edu to find out about programs, campuses, and financial aid. Space is limited, so contact us today to enroll.
An Arizona tradition since 1946, Macayo's Mexican Table serves handcrafted family recipes and innovative contemporary dishes inspired by the flavors of Mexico, made fresh daily. Come by and try our new Tijuana Street Tacos by Chef Eaker for a limited time and taste why Macayo's has been an Arizona tradition for 70 years. Macayo's Mexican Table. The name you know, the food you love.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. And as always, it is now time to talk it out with our partners from First Strategic. With us today is Barry Dill and Marcus Dellartino. Let's start with the big news of the day. We tape on Friday, and just a couple of hours ago, we got the big news that House Speaker Paul Ryan, President Donald Trump, pulling the Obama repeal bill. Marcus?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Listen, they didn't have the votes, and when you don't have the votes, you don't want to go through this. But, you know, looking at President Trump's comments, you know, it's clear that what they're going to do is shift focus on this onto the Democrats and make them responsible for initial Obamacare, #1, and then #2, wait for it to blow up, I think, before. We're seeing rising premiums. We've already experienced them here in Arizona. We got another round coming. Tennessee and Kentucky are both in some serious trouble in their health care system. So
and we've already seen the president come out and blame Democrats for this. I mean, not a single one of them was going to support this.
Well, sure. This is one of the lessons of politics, and he's learning on the job that, first of all, you can't run government like a business. Okay, it doesn't run that way. But #2 is when you lose and you get your butt kicked, you change the subject. So now we're trying to change the subject to, well, we can do taxes and we can do something else. So it's a phony reply.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to ask you, too, a lot of Republicans ran on the platform of repealing and replacing Obamacare. We've got a lot of them here in Arizona. 2 solid no's from Representative Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs. They didn't vote against this. Are they reneging on campaign promises here? They had the opportunity to do it.
Trust me, both those guys will be A-OK. You know, they are not in competitive districts. They're in very hardcore Republican districts, and what they are going to say to their base of support is, look, it didn't go far enough. It did not accomplish the goals that I told you I wanted to do, which was bring down the prices, bring more choice, a whole list of factors, and frankly, it's difficult to argue with them. We knew from the outset that this wasn't the world's most well-crafted bill from the standpoint of getting Republican votes, and that the evidence is.
But the one thing they forgot to mention during their campaigns was that, oh yeah, by the way, 24 million Americans are going to be without health care insurance once we pass this reform and repeal law. So they need to be held accountable for that.
Yeah, well, and we have seen, you know, with the press conferences immediately following the announcement they were pulling this bill, that Republicans were, quote, they were going to move on. What are they moving on to?
It sounds like they're going to move on to tax cuts. It's certainly what it sounds like to me.
Are they going to have any more luck with this if they can't get consensus on an issue that they have been banging on for 7 years?
Yeah, I think there will be plenty of issues where the Freedom Caucus and the more moderate members can team up and move some legislation. It just so happens that this particular answer to fixing Obamacare was not did not work. And by the way, this will not be the last time in the next 4 years we revisit this
everything
issue.
that was promised during the last campaign about more open government, about we're going to change things, all this, we're right back to the Republicans and the president are going to ramrod through.
I know, it's kind of like when
can,
Obama promised lower health care premiums for everybody, right?
So what does this say, though, about what does this say about the current president's ability to close? He's a closer, right?
Well, he learned that it's not like closing a business deal, okay? Especially when you're dealing with about the lives of 300 million people, as opposed to just being in a room with 5 or 6 principals trying to negotiate a deal. He did the wise thing because the bill was a piece of crap. But he had to move on. They've got to move on to something else, and like I said, change the subject into something that maybe he'd like to talk about.
Even the Democrats agree Obamacare is not working, okay? And so it's not the last... Yeah, absolutely they do. It's just not this morning from Nancy Pelosi, but if you go back a year ago, Nancy Pelosi agreed to the fact that rising costs and premiums are causing trouble within the market.
And what was in this bill that would make it any better?
Well, obviously...
Other than throwing people off of health care insurance.
You guys are going to keep reiterating that argument, but you have no plan to fix it yourselves. You're not fixing the plan that you actually didn't read in the first place. Nancy Pelosi admits she never read the plan.
You guys have had 7 years to do it.
No,
and
we
then
just
you
got
this up the very
Donald Trump
thing out of the boat.
All right,
and it fails miserably.
I always hate to break up a good argument.
I know you
but we're going to have to move on to another issue. We're talking about Jeff Flake sponsoring this bill that some say would allow companies to sell your data, your internet history browsing, all this information without your knowledge. Now, under Obama administration said he said companies had to get your permission before you sold this information. But Flake is now saying with this bill is you have the option to opt out, that they can go ahead and sell this information, but you have to actually physically opt out of this bill. Like, why is he picking this as an issue?
This is he's picking it, I think, sort of from his libertarian standpoints. But if you're looking for me to agree, we're going to have a problem. And I think, frankly, probably Barry and I agree more. I mean, the issue of privacy is near and dear to my heart. So I don't think that this was the attack that he should have certainly unfolded. I think he's trying to go. I think what he's attacking is the FCC's authority to make that change. And I understand that. However, that being said, that change puts the consumers at a disadvantage.
But I can't imagine if you went out and you talked to 100 Arizonans or 100 people out in the public and said, hey, the company should be able to just sell your browser information and all this other stuff without you actually giving them permission instead of opting out. I can't imagine many people would say, yeah, that's a great idea.
In political terms, Senator Flake is facing a very difficult re-election coming up next year. And his biggest fear right now is attacks from the right. And so this was a pro-business bill that he wants to hold his hat on.
And last question, we only got about 20 seconds left here. Is this pay raise proposal now by lawmakers in the legislature saying we may want to give them a 1% raise next year? Is that going to be enough to satisfy teachers?
Oh, nothing's ever going to satisfy teachers. But, I mean, really, because we all know they deserve a bigger raise. But there's just not enough money, okay? So, you know what? I commend the legislature for doing everything they possibly can to get as much as they can into the teacher salary.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for Politics Unplugged this week. Be sure to stop by and get more Politics Unplugged next week. Good night.